What's up, everybody? What are you guys doing tonight? Y'all ready for an exciting show? So what we're going to do tonight's episode, a lot of you already know, it's going to be on domestic violence. So I do have a couple of guests. Tonight's guests, one of them is a friend of mine. She was there when I was going through Cleat as a reserve police officer, and she was there, and I just really look up to her as far as a lot of the domestic violence issues. And we also have another guest tonight, and she is an advocate for domestic violence. So we're going to bring out one, and then we'll probably bring out the other later on. But for right now, I'm going to bring out my friend Kristin. You guys just be respectful. She's a wonderful person. I love her to death. So, all right, Kristin.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good. Pretty good. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I actually am, I'm an investigator. I work predominantly child crimes now. But for the last several years, I have worked not only child crimes, but anything really that had to do with rape or aggravated type domestic violence, in addition to prior patrol. So right now, again, my main focus is child crimes, but it's been an interesting last several years.
Oh,
so.
I'm sure. Yeah. So what got you into being in law enforcement? Like, what was your ultimate goal?
So actually, what really got me interested in law enforcement, both of my parents retired as Oklahoma State Troopers. And so I kind of grew up in that, that household where, I watched two people that really wanted to serve their communities and serve this state. And it made a huge impression on me. I think the biggest thing that impacted me was, as a kid growing up, I'd have people come up to me in the grocery store, or at the time back when we had Blockbuster and different things, they'd come up and say, oh, your mom or dad, they really helped me out. And they did this or that, or, they sat me down and talked to me and gave me good advice. And that really means so much to me. And, when you hear those things, it really touches you, and you realize your parents aren't just your parents, and you really think, well, maybe I can make an impact on someone's life along the way too. So that's what got me into law enforcement. And then I kind of found my niche, with domestics and child crimes. And I think there's a lot of work to be done there. So.
Oh yeah. The numbers are crazy, aren't they?
Yeah, they really are.
I mean, it's nuts. So I know we talked a little while earlier, and I need everybody to understand something about myself. So me personally, I am not a healthcare professional. I don't have the hours and days dedicated like Kristin does or the advocates do. I don't have that. What I am is a person who actually gives a shit about people. And on top of that, it's basically, this is going to be your disclaimer. If you don't feel like this episode, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kristin, but this episode can trigger some issues, underlying issues with people, correct?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that just us as people, as we go along, there's things that happen to us in our lives, and we really tend to repress those things because we just deal with it the best way that we know how. And we all process things differently. We all learn to deal with things differently. But trauma is trauma. And so sometimes you don't realize, what's going to set that off or be a reminder. And so, I mean, when you get on certain subject matters, then that is going to bring up some feelings and, like you said, some triggers to things that maybe you didn't realize were there or still there.
Yeah. And that sucks just as a person, not even, as law enforcement or anything else.
Yeah,
it just sucks as a person. So now, if some of these triggers actually happen, I don't know, maybe I should tell you or ask our other guest, Staci. But if these triggers happen, what is a step that they can actually go for, and what can they actually do as far as, like, if it happens tonight, and let's say that their abuser was 15, 20 years ago and they've gotten past it, and if something happens tonight, what can they do to either talk about it, suppress it, whatever needs to happen?
So, that's one of those things where, if it's something that, I would say is a really serious struggle, if it gets to a point where those emotions get so strong, maybe it's going to lead to a situation of self-harm, then I would definitely say to call 911, explain to the dispatcher what's going on, what your feelings are. Law enforcement, to me, one of the biggest parts of our jobs is we show up on scenes and you just talk to people. I don't want to say counselors, but at the end of the day, I mean, that's what you're doing. So if you're having these thoughts, if it gets to an extreme point, to where you think that, hey, I can't deal with this. I need someone to listen to me, or I need some help, then by all means call 911. Get someone over there that can help you, and law enforcement can do that. I know in our state, I know some of your viewers are not in Oklahoma, but I know here, as you know, we have places for people in crisis to go to, and we can make those things happen just by kind of going over some things that are going on with that person. We can get you into someone that can do an assessment, and then sometimes they'll send you home with a safety plan. Sometimes they'll recommend a placement to get you a bed for the night and have access to the counselors just immediately. If it's not something that gets to that point, then people like Staci, who are victims advocates, they don't just have to come out in a situation of domestic violence or something like that. Like the Safeline banner that she just put up, you can call Safeline. They have resources there. You can speak with someone on the phone. My experience with Safeline has been great. I have always had good luck with Safeline when I've had to call for people, or even just call for resources. And beyond counseling and things like that, they have resources for legal advice. They have resources for shelters, things like that. So there's all kinds of good things that can come from that.
Good. Yeah. And that's what people need to understand, is that just because you call the police, a lot of times the police, they're not going to judge you just because you need somebody to talk to.
No, not at all.
You could tell them it's a non-emergency, so they don't need to come in all code and come squealing up into the parking lot with guns and everything. It's not going to happen.
No.
You can actually call the local number, like ours is, in Norman, it's a 405 number, and, so forth and so on. They don't need to, not 911, considering that's an emergency line, but definitely if need be. I mean, if that's the only one that I would remember, I'd remember it. But yeah, absolutely. Another thing too is, so basically, I know we talked about it, and I'm on a different playing field than I think a lot of people are anyway, period, as a civilian. I do have a little bit more oomph than the typical civilian. So if something was happening, if I'm walking my dogs and I'm in a parking lot and I hear something, now I'm not going to go kicking in a friggin' door. But if I hear threatening terms, I'm going to beat your ass, or I'm going to kill you, or anything else, and it's outside, it's my business, correct? And just like anybody else.
Oh yeah, sure. If you hear threats being made, then, by all means, don't put yourself in a potentially deadly situation. If you can't report what's going on and you can't get help there, it defeats the whole purpose of you trying to intervene. Obviously most of us have pretty good common sense and judgment. And so, I can't really give any direct advice on intervention, but what I will say for sure, get on the phone, get a hold of police. And when you speak with dispatch, first thing, make sure you give an exact an exact location. We've had calls where, there's someone being assaulted at a grocery store parking lot. Well, in some areas, you have this huge super center. So police are going to respond, but then they're going to spend probably another, how many minutes trying to find which exact place they're at. Try to be as specific as you can with places that it's not an address. Try to give as many details on your surroundings. Make sure you give details about what's going on. Who is the suspect? Who's the victim? If you see, we'll just say, if you see a female subject assaulting a male subject, and you have a very good visual on her description, give that. Make sure you let them know what you're seeing. And just because you're saying, hey, this is what's going on, it doesn't mean that person's going to be named, in the end. They may not be the one that was the initial aggressor. You don't know,
right?
Because it's kind of like us. We get there and then we make those determinations later and figure things out. But initially, what you want to do is you want to make sure that help is getting there, parties get separated, and people are safe.
Oh, absolutely. So if like your typical person, let's say you're walking down the street, or you're like you said, you're coming out of Walmart, and you need to give, if you see something, say something.
Right.
But do it at a safe distance, because you don't know that person.
Right.
There's no way that you can go and assess the situation knowing that that person has a weapon or not. You're not a police officer. You're not trained.
Sure.
So the best thing would be to just call 911, give the description of the vehicle or the person, and a rough estimate on what the height, whatever.
Right.
But make sure that they call, not start recording.
Yeah,
right?
and that's a huge. As like you said, we talked about it. And that's a huge problem now. Is in our society today, people are so quick to whip out the cell phone. And, they want to record it. Well, what good does that do anybody at that time? I'm not saying, if you see it and you report it, I'm not saying don't record at that point in between the report. Mm-hmm. But do something productive, just sitting there and filming something and not making an attempt to get help to that person being victimized does absolutely no good. And, whenever you're a bystander to that and you don't report, that's, yeah, all states have different laws, but you need to make that call. So
yeah, and also too, the different states do different things. Every jurisdiction does things differently. Mm-hmm. But I know here in Oklahoma, especially, that we take domestics completely seriously.
Yeah.
Jess's comment, she went something similar to that with her younger cousin. Now, of course, that's not here. We can't base what we would do off of what happened in Jersey, sure, because again, two different jurisdictions. But the thing is too, is that a lot of people have that misconception that a domestic is male, female.
Yeah. I had a really interesting, when I had very first started as a police officer, I remember the first domestic I had gone to that was a male victim. The only reason I knew that he was the one that had been assaulted, because he had not told me the truth when I got there. And it was a super cold day. There was snow on the ground, and things, when it's cold, your skin tends to hold on to marks a little bit more. She had actually hit him across the face with a picture frame, and it broke across his face. Those markings, are really clear across his cheek. And he and I talked about it. He's like, I don't want her to go to jail. It's the same thing that female victims say. But another part of it is, he's like, well, I'm the guy this isn't supposed to happen. And that's another sad thing for a lot of men that can be in these really bad relationships with a lot of domestic violence. They think, they think people aren't going to believe them, or they think they're going to be judged. Well, you're a big, strong guy. How are you going to let her beat up on you? Well, it's not that simple. And it's not, there's a lot of things that go into it. So we do have a lot of trouble with men not wanting to report.
Right.
So,
Yeah, of course, because they don't want to say like the 6'7", 6'7"
yeah.
guy of 200 pounds, 280 is getting, his ass whooped by
Yeah.
a 5-foot woman. I mean,
Right.
in his eyes, he's going to be demasculated.
Right.
But on the flip side of that, he's also in an abusive relationship.
Exactly.
And people don't realize that they're in a abusive relationship until they actually see some of the things on websites.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, is that the only way that they can see some of these things that are like, how do I know if I'm in a crappy relationship? I mean, they can just go visit the website,
Yeah.
It's crazy. It really is. Domestic is no joke. And you're absolutely right, Jess. They should be handled the same across the state lines. But I mean, unfortunately, every state has their own protocol and their own way of handling things.
And our criminal codes are all set up differently too. So
That's a huge thing. So like what we would consider a misdemeanor here in Oklahoma, they might consider a felony out in New Jersey or New York.
Well, and even Oklahoma and Texas, as close as we are, and as similar as a lot of our things are, Texas has a different setup for things, as I found out with some child crimes. I mean, it's different. But the good thing is, one thing I will say, Jess, I believe that a lot of the same programs and a lot of the officer training is going to be the same across the board. So that is one good thing that we have going for us.
Absolutely. And so I know a lot of people have seen it on TikTok, and I know a lot of people have seen it on Instagram. Really not 100, maybe on TV commercials here and there. It's not that big, but there's a hand gesture that a lot of people will do, that it does this, I believe, and then it covers up. It means that the abuser is here. I can't really talk about it. Do you know anything about that? And if you do, is it a true thing?
I mean, maybe it is on some cases. I've seen it on social media. I haven't personally had any experience with that on a call. I haven't had any cases where that has been something that caused an initial report. I'm sure that maybe has happened other places. I just haven't personally worked that situation.
Gotcha.
But, it's like we had talked about earlier, just because like when we talked about it, I didn't quite remember that until you explained it, but you recognized it. So if you were to see someone doing that, and that's what they mean. If you understand that and you think that is something that is going on, then I would encourage people to make that report. It's better safe than sorry in my mind.
100%. So it's also the but and if I've seen it, and I know millions of other people have seen it, that also means that the abuser has seen it as well.
Sure.
So it's kind of like even with the pizza thing, if you call it pizza, the abuser is going to know that too, because the abuser is not stupid by any means. They've been groomed, over the years, and I just don't understand. I don't know how we can get past those to get to a common ground to where it's like, look, I'm getting abused, bro. I'm done with it.
I think and I know Staci's probably going to talk about this a lot more. I know there's so many factors that go into it. One thing that I would always get tired of hearing from witnesses, especially, or, maybe from relatives, people who didn't know that victim that well. People are really quick to pass judgment. They're really quick to say, well, why didn't she leave? Why didn't she do this? Why didn't she do that? We all have different resources. We all have different support systems. And the bottom line is some people don't have resources. They don't have a support system. Right. They're afraid of what will happen, especially if they have kids. When you look at the scenario, the victim's already going through all this trauma every single day, and it's not a normal day-to-day thing where you just go about your business and then this happens. And no, this is a day-to-day, just trying to survive and make it to the next day, while trying to take care of your kids, or while trying to maybe take care of an ailing parent or whatever. It's a huge life thing, because let's say, if let's just say that victim maybe had an aunt or a friend she could go stay with a couple of counties over. Well, if she's got kids, now we've got to figure out, how are the kids going to get to school? What are we going to do with all this? I mean, there's so many factors, and I just don't think that people consider it enough what the victims have to go through in order to make those steps for change. So it's a huge thing, and I really wish people would be more understanding to that.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm also, I'm also, thinking that, man, if somebody would have just told me that, sorry, you guys, I am in my apartment and my dog is kind of going crazy over here.
Well,
so.
my daughter popped in a little bit ago. So I got daughter, I got painted walls.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm not in the studio. I don't know what she's doing. So she's trying to drive me crazy right now. So I'm sorry, you guys. But I mean, as far as the victims do tend to blame themselves, and, and being in law enforcement. So if I'm on a domestic call and I figure out because again, we have to separate them, and I figure out who is the aggressor and who is the one that actually did the abuse. We go to hook them, and then the police officer gets attacked by the victim. And with that happening, now we're in a whole nother ball game, because it's a huge issue, because now the victim is trying to protect her abuser or his abuser. And because they know once they get out of jail, they're going to get basically beat.
And I think that's one thing that's important too for people to remember. A lot of times people wonder why officers show up and they direct the scene a certain way, and they want to separate people, and it's, they're not initially talking to anybody. They're just trying to get parties separated and things like that. There's a method to the madness. And, like you said, we have to do things for safety reasons. Another thing is too, we don't want that victim anywhere near the suspect disclosing what's going on, because it's a safety issue for that victim. So, so it's one of those things, if and when someone calls, please be patient with law enforcement. 9 times out of 10, the officer is going to know what to do, and they are going to care, and they're going to want to take care of the problem. I know there's always that little tiny percentage that it doesn't happen that way. I'm not going to pretend that that's not relevant. It is. But for the most part, when officers get on scene, just make sure that you tell them everything that's going on as safely as you can, and listen to direction, and that way things can get taken care of, and the victim can get those resources.
Right. And it's also, and it also too depends on how many times that law enforcement has been out at that residence. And if the one police officer, just one, actually sits there and pays attention, let's say there's 8 of them out there and only one pays attention, he could actually save the life of the female, or, if it's 2 male roommates, and see what's going on. And all it takes is just one person to make that difference. For sure. So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very dangerous situation for law enforcement, period. Definitely.
The lethality rate for law enforcement during domestics, I don't know where we're at. We had talked about that earlier. Now it's not really, I don't think that traffic and domestic situations are our deadliest situations now. We've had other things kind of come into play in the last year or two, but domestics, when we go through our academies, as you know, those can turn lethal for law enforcement very quickly. I mean, they're already volatile situations. There's a certain character that goes with an abuser, obviously, as we all can figure out. But they're very intense situations. And so we just have to handle those with a lot of caution.
See, and I know, being in law enforcement, I'm about to do something to this dog. She keeps scratching at her. I call it her jail. So she's actually in jail because she's I'm crumbling up a piece of paper so I can throw it at the kennel. So stop. So I know, being in law enforcement, we actually have these wonderful things as well.
Mm-hmm.
And, and it's called the lethality assessment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you guys, I don't know if every department actually has these. I know ours does, and I think yours does too.
Yeah.
It might be Oklahoma too. And if you answer yes to any of these, the top 3 questions, and it activates a protocol.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just bottom line. I'm not going to go through the top 3 questions, but if you answered yes to any of the top 3, when we ask a question, and even if you kind of got a hesitant because you're going, no, that's almost as good as a yes, because now you're trying to protect yourself and the other. So I needed everybody to know that, because we do have these. I know I carry them all the time in my bag, and it's like a whole list of things. It's absolutely insane.
And on that note, those packets, guys, that he's explaining, and I'm pretty sure other states are probably going to have the same or similar. If you were to be the victim of domestic violence, and the officer responds, and they get you in the car, or they get you, in a conference room, interview room, whatever, and they start asking you these things, please try to be as open and honest as you can, because we're not saying these things to be nosy, to pry.
Right.
And it's honest concern and care to want to get you to a better situation as a victim. And some of the questions, they are hard to answer, and they are emotion provoking. So, we understand that. But like he's saying, there's a lot of questions on there that there's specific protocols that go with those questions. So it's really important to be as honest as possible.
Yes, we're not trying to pry. We're trying to get as much information as possible. And a lot of people are going to be like, "Oh, you're just being nosy." No, we're trying to. It's called an investigation, and we're trying to investigate what has happened. I had a rolling domestic, and for anybody that doesn't know what that is actually one that's on the road. They're driving and they're yelling at each other and screaming, and calls are coming in left and right, and try to find that one. That's a hard one to find. It's not at a stationary place, because next thing you know, you get a call and it's, a block away, and it's another block away. And then you're chasing a rabbit initially. And that's probably that was my worst. That was probably the hardest one I think I ever played around, because it was mobile.
Yeah, those are something else.
They are. I'm gonna try to get a hold of Staci. See if Staci, are you still out there in the comment section?
I saw her a second ago.
I did too. Kind of want to have her pop on too.
Yeah.
But yeah, you guys, it's you have to say something. I know, we've got 16 people watching, and you guys, it's I'm just going to spit it out. It's time to start being better humans towards one another. Period. This is the statistics are bullshit. The statistics are ludicrous, and it just, if you see somebody, if you see something, just say something. I mean, I personally would rather you if I'm on duty, I would much rather you gave me a call to 911 and me haul ass over there and do my thing, because it's just the right thing to do. I mean, you just have to.
Yeah. And then, too, you have to, as a parent, we have to think about protecting our kiddos and the things that they see and that they experience in those domestic situations. I mean, those impact them for life. And the big picture is what they see and what they internalize affects them in the future. And there's actually a lot of studies that show, especially girls they grow up in those type of situations, they're more likely to end up in that same type of abusive relationship in the future. There's a study, we talked about ACEs. That's really interesting. It's ACES. If anyone wants to go and kind of look that up, there's a lot of interesting statistics and things on that. So yeah, it's definitely a big deal, and we need to make sure we're reporting those instances.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And as far as there's so many different things that people just you can't, oh man, I can't even spit it out, enough of it out, just because it's like, this is a huge topic. It's like here, it's like Wendy says, be better, do better. I mean, we just have to collectively, because these numbers are, it's absolutely ridiculous. And do you think it's more numbers now from 2020, because now you're stuck at home? There's no school, stress, everything else, no job.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Oklahoma's, our child abuse cases have gone up like crazy, and that's the thing is you have people that are stuck home, whether it's an adult or a child, they're stuck home now a lot of the time with their abuser. And we don't have, when it comes to the kiddos, and I won't get into much on that topic because that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah.
But the kiddos now, they're not in school, and a lot of the times we depend on teachers and faculty to report and let us know what's going on, what they're seeing with the kids at home. So if you have workers, by the same token, that are maybe now doing, they're working from home, they're not coming into the office, like they were. Maybe their coworkers aren't able to make sure that their welfare is good. A lot of times, I mean, we get pretty close to our coworkers, and we usually know what's going on with them. So I would think being home quite a bit, like so many companies are, a lot of people have lost their support systems and the ones that check in on them through this COVID stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Kristin, I really appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
No problem. Just hang out, and I'm going to we'll try to get all three of us on a little bit later.
Awesome.
All right.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Bye, guys.
What's going on, Staci? How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Now let's everybody. This is Staci. She is the advocate for domestic violence, and I thank you for being here. I really do appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, because I know it's busy as hell.
Well, I really appreciate you bringing awareness to this topic, because we think about the COVID pandemic. There is also a domestic violence pandemic going on as well. So I really appreciate you bringing the awareness.
I'm it's something that's been spewing out of my cranium, because like I said before, it needs to be addressed. There's too many people being hurt, and especially in front of kids. And when kids are being involved with it, those kids think that that's how to do things. And then they grow up, and then they're going to be the ones to be the abusers, or the abusees, I guess you could say. So it's kind of like we need to break this cycle. We need to break this stigma. We need to start speaking up and helping each other. And I'm just, like I've told everybody before, I'm just a guy trying to help out, man. That's just what I'm doing.
Well, when you look at numbers, 26 people per minute in the United States are being abused by an intimate partner. And stats are going to, vary from one source to another, but 20 to 26 people per minute. That is a lot. And like you mentioned, the children, a lot of our referrals come from DHS, where, children, there was a domestic, police were called, children were present, and they end up referring them to us. After DHS steps in, and they are required to do services with us. We do victim services where I work, but also then the perpetrator would be required to do some services as well. But it has a lifelong impact on these children. They don't have a say-so.
Absolutely. Now, I know a lot of people, especially like myself, Now, there's more than just physical abuse. There's emotional abuse as well. And that can go along the lines of anything, really. Now, I'm not 100% on one of the cases that I participated in. But it was a DHS call, and the long story short, the child had no running water at the residence for I want to say 2 months. And when that came about, DHS kind of came in, looked around, and was like, "We don't see an issue," and walked away. And I was mortified, because that child was going to school, and there was no bath. She was getting picked on, and she's only, I want to say, maybe 9-10 years old. So it was kind of brutal for me, but is DHS the only one, or is there more? I mean, I've only heard of DHS.
Yeah, as far as when children are present, and exposure can be many different things. So it doesn't have to be, a lot of neglect does come with domestic violence. Victims in survival mode themselves, it's hard to take care of a child when you're just trying to survive. We get referrals from all over the place, but, as far as looking at the children, exposure could even be, they were in another room when it happened. They heard threats. They saw the aftermath, maybe bruising, blood, tears, torn clothing, broken items. And so the whole scope of things, when you look at it, we get the hospital occasionally, referrals from there as well. And that's where the community collaboration is extremely important, where, I know DHS workers on a first name basis. I know nurses at Mercy that we work with, that I know the police, that law enforcement is very common to refer as well. I have personally worked with Kristin on cases. So, Kristin might have a question, might call me up and say, "Hey, this victim right here has some questions." So referrals come from everywhere. But collaboration is absolutely key.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, so I explained it to Kristin too. So if I'm outside walking my dogs and I hear noise and I hear the terms, just very descriptive terms saying, "I'm going to beat you. I'm going to kill you. I'm sure there's a million more that I could say, but I don't really want to trigger anybody or anything else." So, but it is great to say something, like call the 911. Like if you hear a comment to that description, just call the number and be like, "It's coming from this building. I don't know where it's exactly at, but I know it's coming from this building." I mean, that could potentially save a life.
Absolutely. And I would say call 911 versus intervening, because you don't know if there's a weapon present. Lethality goes up extremely high, not just for the victim, but for bystanders as well, and law enforcement, as y'all had mentioned, if a weapon is present and you don't know. And anything can be a weapon. And that's when I'm talking to my victims, survivors, have they ever used a weapon against you? Well, not a gun or a knife, but sometimes a car, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Even on my desk, which I'm working with victims, but still, I like to keep my hole punch back where no one can reach it. I like to have access to my door, things like that. And that's how, I tend to look at things. And so the best thing you can do, call the police. If you make them mad, say it's a friend, even if you make them mad, that's better than them ending up dead. So
absolutely,
please speak up.
So what made you decide to become an advocate?
So I have been an advocate for about 3.5 years now. I am a domestic violence survivor and actually a former client at the agency that I work for. So my goal is to spread awareness, take a bad situation and a bad experience to help other people.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you have a story to tell.
Oh, absolutely. You could do a whole probably a whole podcast on my story alone. So.
Right. So I remember going through Cleat, and anybody that's outside of Oklahoma, Cleat is for Council for Law Enforcement Education and Training, and it's only Oklahoma. Other states have different setup and everything else. So I'm going through Cleat, and that's how I met Kristin. I'm going through the Reserve Academy, and I forgot where I was going to go with that, to be honest with you. But we did domestic practicals, and we learned different types of scenarios as to where you could go into a room and there's like 8 people, and immediately you have to start getting people out and moved and figure out who the aggressor is. And if there's only 2 cops versus 8 people, it could get scary really quick, and the cop has to be on edge. So when you guys see that the cop is on edge, yeah, there's like 8 people, and we're gonna be on edge. It's just the way the nature of the beast. But there was another advocate that came to us, and one of her stories was that she would just she actually went, her husband at the time, her abuser, we'll just call him her abuser actually had a pistol, and she took the firing pin out. And then I guess like several days later, he told her that he was going to kill her and put the gun to her head, pulled the trigger, and it didn't fire because she took the firing pin out. Now, y'all, that is real shit. That can really freaking happen. And it does happen. And that's a scary situation for anybody. But she knew it. She had a feeling, and everybody will tell you, trust your gut. And she did. So I'm kind of curious, if you don't mind, I'm kind of curious as to like maybe a little tidbit of your story.
So mine, it started out gradual. Some of the comments saying, sometimes you don't realize what exactly is going on. And like you mentioned earlier, it's not just physical. So it started out him ripping up pictures of people, guys specifically that I went to high school with. And I thought, oh, well, he's just a little bit jealous. And I was mistaken when I thought his possessiveness was protectiveness. Mm-hmm. So it started out grabbing, pushing, insults, definitely, but he would laugh about it. So I was like, okay, the way it is a grooming process. And it can be so gradual. 7 to 9 times is the average that a victim is going to take for them to leave before they finally break free from it. I actually left my abuser so we got married in 2006. Abuse had already started. I left him, divorced him in 2008. Had contact with law enforcement who connected me with the agency that I now work for. Mm-hmm. I was getting counseling. He changed, all that good stuff. He promised to get counseling as well. I ended up back with him. Was ready to leave again and ended up pregnant and felt like I could not leave. He had not allowed me to work. He took the phone. He worked. We lived probably 20 miles from the nearest gas station even.
Wow.
So he would take the phone in the vehicle with him. I hadn't worked. He had isolated me from family. Mm-hmm. So at that point, I felt like I had nothing and that I could not make it without him. So did end up delivering a healthy child. Did end up finally getting away. And there is so much more between that, but just kind of to keep it brief, ended up getting a protective order. It was hard though. And even though I had no contact with him, direct contact, I ended up having to get another protective order for stalking.
Are we there? Are we back?
Yeah.
I think we just had, I don't know if it was both of us or me or what, but
I don't know. It lagged for a minute, but yeah, I am safe now. My child is safe. And
Good.
That's where, advocacy, you're going to go through the process, the grief process with a breakup. Domestic violence, it's just amplified that much more. It's not a regular breakup, but safety planning when you do decide to leave, that is key. I do want to stress that 75% of the homicides occur when you tell the abuser you're leaving or even after you have already left. So safety planning, key, if nothing else.
That's definitely a big factor right there. So Ruth does have a question. I do have a couple of questions to ask you. Ruth does have a question. Where was it? How does one become an advocate?
So most agencies in the state of Oklahoma, our agencies are certified by the Attorney General's office. Most agencies prefer that you have a bachelor's degree in some sort of counseling, psychology, something along those lines. But not necessarily all of them. That's a requirement. It is preferred. I personally do have a counseling degree. After I broke away from the abuser, I did get a counseling degree. So I do have a bachelor's degree.
Cool.
Even if not becoming an advocate, we always need volunteers. So contacting your local agency, whatever state you might be in, and I would, ask about volunteering, which might later lead to employment opportunities.
Absolutely. So another question, it was brought to my attention. So let's say something happened 20 years ago, 18 years ago, and it was an abusive relationship, and they seeked counseling, they seeked all the treatments, everything was good. Fast forward to being, 18 years older, 20 years older, and they're having an intimate relationship. Now, let's say the boyfriend or the girlfriend, we'll just use the boyfriend as an example. He does something that triggers something to the victim at one point. Now, since she's already been through all the counseling and already did everything, but this triggered, what can she do to, I guess, just talk to somebody? Just call the police and have somebody come out and just chit chat, or should that person call an advocate?
An advocate, probably. I mean, as long as there's no physical danger, anything like that, then, reach out to that safe line and they'll connect you to someone, an advocate within your area. That's what I tell my clients. A lot of them that are referred by DHS want to do their 26-week program and be done. But some of them come back on their own. I was a client there twice, same abuser, but I knew I could reach out. Once you have been through it, domestic violence, sexual assault, or stalking, all of our services are free, like for life. It doesn't have to be a recent incident. You can be a secondary survivor even, that boyfriend, husband that triggered something that maybe didn't mean to. It was innocent, unintentional, maybe. He could reach out as well and get services, and we could help him figure out how to deal with some of that as well. So not just direct victims, but secondary, but for life. If you've ever been through it, you qualify for free services through one of the agencies. So okay. Now, I know we talked the other day about you mentioned something was this month, something was next month. Like what because I'm still befuddled, whatever the word is. Y'all know I'll make up my own words. So and I know everybody in the comment section probably does not know half of what we were talking about. So I'm going to let you tell people what we chit chatted about as far as like which month was what month. Okay. So as far as being an advocate, it's not always just directly working with the victims. That's a lot of it, but outreach and education is a big piece as well. So it's my job to go to law enforcement and explain who I am. It's my job to go educate on how to do things and there are certain months that are dedicated toward different types of awareness. So January is Stalking Awareness Month, which stalking does go along with domestic violence many times and does absolutely increase the likelihood the abuser will kill the victim. February, you've got Teen Dating Violence Awareness. Really important on that because a lot of people who end up in abusive relationships, their first abusive relationship was in their teenage years.
That's
really
insane.
It is. And myself and Kristin actually worked together at a high school, and we educated every high school student that day. During their English class, they actually got to come visit with us.
Awesome.
And so we did surveys, our agency did, and it was really alarming that high school students were writing, I've already been through this. You should have taught me this in middle school.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is our goal. We tried prior to COVID, getting into the daycares even. We start with body safety and, work our way up from there. Back to the awareness months. April is sexual assault awareness. Sexual assault does occur in marriages as well. We look at that with domestic violence, the sexual abuse piece of it. So that is April. And then October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Mm-hmm. So just throwing those out there, really important. Usually your local agency is going to have some type of memorial, something during those months. So if you are interested in volunteering, they can always use help with those events and those awareness months.
And where would they find those? Just on the website?
Yeah, if you go on the Attorney General's website and look for the certified agencies, for example, within Oklahoma, and look and see where your local agencies are. Around here, you're looking at, just thinking, Shawnee, McAllister, Ardmore, Durant, Lawton. Those are just a few of the places that have shelters in our state. Tulsa, Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, just go in there, look for your certified agencies, contact them, and just tell them you're interested in volunteering and helping with awareness.
So do you think volunteering and helping out, you think that could actually help somebody that's been through this, such as yourself, just going in and volunteering and helping out just to, I don't know, I can't think of it, but like maybe help their mindset?
Absolutely. And that, I was so angry after I realized what abuse was and going through it, and that it was a choice. This person chose to do this to me. I had anger. I never suggest revenge, but you are angry and you're like, okay, what I have found for myself is volunteering in the beginning, because I stayed in touch with them, did help. And being an advocate does help. The best revenge, like I said, I don't promote revenge, but is being successful. His favorite thing was, you will never make it without me. You're nothing without me.
Shit.
And so now I'm like, look at me now.
Yeah.
Tell me I'm nothing now.
Because what you did, you bossed up, you took care of your shit, you handled your shit. And kudos, because that's badass. Sorry, go ahead.
Absolutely. And that is the best form. Like I said, I hate to use the word revenge, but that, overcoming. And so the volunteering, being around women, we actually have a 30-day shelter, but we do a lot of out client stuff. You don't have to go into shelter to be a client. You can be out client. But I think the volunteering, definitely giving back after your bad experience, absolutely good for healing.
Absolutely. I think the more people reach out, the more people get it, the more people volunteer, the more people talk about it, I honestly believe the less it's going to happen. The statistics have got to drop, because this is ridiculous. What are some of the statistics that you've come across, let's say from the past, I don't know, was just maybe 5 years or so? Have they gone up in 2020 or?
Oh, absolutely. They have gone up, and Oklahoma actually ranks 3rd in the nation for the number of women killed by men. 3rd.
And
it bounces back and forth. We've been 5th. We've been 11th. But my research from an article in November of 2020 had said that Oklahoma was 3rd. And that's not to discount men killed by women as well. But this study specifically, 3rd in the nation for women killed by men.
That's ridiculous. In the
Absolutely.
Nation. That's Oklahoma.
Not a number that we're proud of by any means.
No, I would rather be 3rd at like the OU game or something, not in domestic violence BS. Ruth says, does volunteering put myself at risk of triggering the unhealthy coping mechanisms that I had before? No.
So when we look at volunteers, in the beginning, especially, you are going to have very minimal contact with an actual victim. Part of our volunteering might be things like sorting through clothing donations, things of that nature. We don't want to expose you. Now, interns, it would be a little bit different. You might have some hands-on direct contact. But for the most part, it could still be triggering. I mean, who's to say that you're in the office, which right now most of our stuff is being done virtually, but that you're not in the office and a victim comes in that the police have just dropped off with a black eye could definitely be triggering, or other injuries, more severe injuries, or just hearing something that person says. So we do try to keep that separate. And the volunteering, there's still things that trigger me. And really important is having that knowledge that you can go to your coworker and debrief with them for a little bit, because there's some things that pop up now that I haven't thought about since I left my abuser. So we would try to definitely keep that separate.
I got you. Yeah, it's this is such a nasty, and I know this is such a hard topic for a lot of people, but it can't be swept under the rug. We have to do better, period. Just as people, because, and I know there's a lot of people that don't like certain musics and, genres of music or, everything else. But there was one in particular. It was by Tupac, and it was years ago. And he says in one of the songs, it was called Brenda's Got a Baby. And he actually made a statement about a little girl having a baby or whatever. And he says, why do we hate our women? Why do we degrade our women? Why do we beat our women? And it just goes on and on. We should cherish our women. We should, respect our women. He was actually telling like a story on, this is what we should be doing. We should not be assholes towards our women. And unfortunately, it's, of course, again, it's gotten a 1,000 times worse, especially here in Oklahoma, ranking 3rd. That's ridiculous. I'm kind of curious to see what it is like nationwide.
I'm not, I think Alaska, I want to say, my last that I looked, Alaska was number 1 with domestic. God. And then Missouri. So it was like Alaska, Missouri, Oklahoma. Alaska, a lot of times people want to attribute that to the high alcohol usage. Just to be clear, drugs and alcohol absolutely complicate, a domestic violence situation, but alcohol and drugs themselves do not cause domestic violence. So it's a power and control issue. It's not an anger issue. It's not a drug and alcohol issue, but they absolutely do compound the situation.
Right. And and Ruth, I know this is a tough topic, and this is probably why a lot of mainstream media probably just do not touch it. But I think it's sometimes, and like on our last episode of, what it was, I'm not going to bring it up, especially during this topic. But our last episode, we've been always saying, inhale the good shit, exhale the bullshit, take 3 minutes to yourself and just inhale. It'll help your anxiety. It'll help out, just clear your head and get them just reset, and I really hope that a lot of people on this chat actually kind of do that 3-minute and detox from this episode, because I know this is a tough one for everybody. But how did you and my friend Kristin meet up? Is it just on a work one day? You just kind of went like, hey, and then y'all just clicked?
Well, my hometown, she was law enforcement actually in my hometown. And that is one of the counties that I cover as an advocate. We don't like to say that we have certain counties, but we kind of do. Myself and the other advocate, and then we have a shelter advocate, but me and the other one pretty much cover 5 counties. So there's 2 of us. Yeah. And so my county, yes, because it's my hometown. I still live in this town.
Absolutely.
Kristin was law enforcement, and she was kind of the go-to on domestics. And so that's how we hooked up. We've kept in touch. So thankful for Kristin and all law enforcement. But Kristin specifically made it very easy, because I'm not going to lie, I do get some resistance. I have had, we go to, in the past, to the emergency room when there's a sexual assault or domestic, and I've had law enforcement say, who are you? Who called you? Why are you here? And I start explaining victims' rights, and they get frustrated with me. And I'm not at all hateful with them, but we do have 2 separate jobs. Law enforcement is going to investigate and do their part like that. But Kristin, I never had any resistance. I feel like we just clicked, and she knew she could call me if she had any questions, and I could contact her if I had questions. So
yeah, absolutely.
I miss her tremendously.
What are some of the like just some red flags that, let's say, if you go out on a date, what are some of the red flags to look out for as far as your potential partner?
So red flags, and had I known these at the time,
see, this could help. This could help in my dating world too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So quick involvement is a red flag that we look at. Okay. 3rd date, they're telling you they love you. Let's have babies together.
Oh, hell.
Red flag right there.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
The degrading women, and I understand. I don't want to downplay that men are victims as well. I have male clients. But the degrading of women is one we hear quite often. The controlling behavior, you really got to watch protective versus possessive. Like I said, I thought he was being protective, and it was absolutely possessive. So quick involvement. Hey, sweetie, I want you to move in with me within the first week or 2. That's a definite red flag. Criminal history. Yes, we all make mistakes, but if they have a history of protective orders, violent offenses, the abuser is going to try to say, oh, yeah, I really wasn't guilty of that. If you have 3 ex-wives who have all had protective orders against you, maybe you are that unlucky.
That's a dark red flag. That's not even a light red. That's a dark.
No, that's them running through there waving it. So yeah.
Holy cow.
Things like that. But definitely quick involvement. You really that's the biggest one I see. Quick involvement. I love you real quick.
Real fast. Wow. Yeah. I've been told this once before. Yeah. Wow. That was a red flag for me. I was like, what, are you crazy? No, not me.
Pay attention to those red flags. Like you mentioned earlier, trust your gut.
You have to.
You have to. Absolutely.
I mean, you trust it to take a shit, so you're going to trust it with everything else. So you might as well trust that.
There's nothing more trustworthy. There you go.
And no kidding. When we've talked before now, and I've said this a million times to everybody, if we're just going to use a woman because statistically speaking, the woman is the victim. Statistically speaking. Now, okay, we're just going to go that. So, and I tell everybody, if a woman doesn't like her shoes, what is she going to do? Change them. If she doesn't like her hair, what is she going to do? Change them. If she doesn't like her nails, what is she going to do? Change it. But yet, if you don't really like your man, what are you going to do? Keep him? No, you change him, because it's time to 2021 has got to be the time of rebirth, because it's time to set back at our old ways and kind of go, you know what? I'm not putting up with your shit anymore. You're an abuser. I'm out. Peace and hair grease. Be done. Change it. Get out of that crappy situation. And if you can't, I mean, there's avenues to get out. But I do know that if the abuser has sole possession of the finances or the vehicle or anything else, I do know it's a lot harder.
Absolutely. And that, we offer like our 30-day shelter or relocation, and I make referrals as well. You do run into custody issues, divorce, as needed. Our clients, I can refer to legal aid. They may be required to, and they're not going to take every case, but the ones that they do take, our clients end up paying the filing fee versus a retainer fee of at least $100.
Mm-hmm.
So I will make referrals for those obstacles.
I got you. Ruth, and I do stand corrected. I did mean as far as like changing him, as far as like changing like an upgraded model, not keeping the same person and trying to change them. That's I should have probably clarified, but you're absolutely right.
I was thinking that too as you were saying it, but absolutely, you can't change them. But
No,
you replace them.
Yeah, that was the change. You upgrade your model because if that model is like I don't know, an SL, and you want the GT model, then go for the GT model. So
absolutely.
But I mean, it's crazy on how everything is. So even the teen, what did you call it again? Next month, it was
dating violence.
Yeah, I remember I'm 43 years old, and I don't ever remember an advocate coming to my school talking about teen dating violence. I mean, how is that new, or is that something that has happened in the past 10 years?
That is a newer thing. And it's up to us advocates to, find, and being my hometown once again, and it's a small town, one stoplight town. You've built those connections. And so, it's up to us that's the first time, we'd been in others a little bit, but that was different, where I had law enforcement there with me all day collaborating, where I come in and, this is what it is. And then I get law enforcement there too saying, okay, and if you do this, this is what's going to happen. So I never even heard of an advocate until I needed one when I was 26 years old.
Wow.
So
see,
I'd never even heard of it.
And honestly, I never even knew advocates. Oh my goodness, I just got a brain fart. Never knew they even existed until I went through Cleat when I met Kristin. And
utilize those advocates, we can make law enforcement's job so much easier.
Absolutely. I mean, y'all, if I had a question, I'm definitely giving one of y'all a call, especially at the advocate. I mean, because it's like, if I'm in a situation, I'm going to need some help, because being in law enforcement, we don't have all the answers, not by any means.
The bigger agencies actually employ an advocate, but you're looking at rural areas, these smaller towns, that's not going to be the case. But some of the larger ones, I would say probably Tulsa, Oklahoma City, actually have their own advocate, but most of your departments are not going to have that.
Wow. Yeah. So I'm going to attempt to bring Kristin back out. I kind of want to keep talking about the teen dating violence. And I kind of want to like what y'all actually went to the school and discussed, because I don't know if every state actually does this. And it would be great if, I don't know if I've got a teacher over here or not. I can't really, it's hard to tell by the names. I can't remember everybody, but I mean, if they can actually talk to the principal or the superintendent, you know, if they can actually help. I mean, this is going to help, period, getting the word out.
You're going to meet some resistance with it, but I think they had passed a new law like recently that domestic violence or healthy relationships and would be included in some type of health criteria that they're going to require in school. It was myself and another advocate, and then we had 2 law enforcement, Kristin and one of her colleagues. As far as our part, we went over power and control wheel, cycle of violence, looking at that. You know, if people aren't familiar with that, I do suggest you look up the power and control wheel, the cycle of violence. We went over red flags, how to help a friend that's going through it. Really disturbing thing that we heard is one of the things that the guys have started doing to the girls as a form of abuse is spitting on them. So they're like, well, they weren't hitting me. Yeah, that was newer to me. So,
Fuck.
you know, and they didn't see that as being abusive. And so not only, you know, we explained, I think we had law enforcement explain that, you know, those are bodily fluids when you do that. That, you know, looking at the different charges. So I went in there kind of as the nice person per se. And so did my law enforcement who were there. But I was like, okay, this is who you can reach out if this is happening for help. And then law enforcement did have to kind of come in and say, okay, and this is what's going to happen. Do you want to go to college? If you do, let's look at a felony strangulation charge when you're 17 years old.
Wow.
And from that aspect, and we had to get brutal with them. You have to.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring Kristin back out too. I'm gonna try to bust out 3 people on this, because I really like talking about that, because the teenagers, it goes back to parenting.
Absolutely,
it has to. All right, here we go, Kristin.
I'm back.
There she is. So yeah, what do you? I'm mind blown by this this whole thing about these damn teenagers.
Yeah, it was a really interesting day whenever Staci and I went, and then, you know, we got the wasn't it just a little card, Staci, that we handed out, and they had to fill out and leave it after the class. I don't remember how we got all the feedback, but like she said, you know, one of the big things that we noticed, a lot of them disclosed that they have been spit on by their boyfriends, and that's something that I had noticed on calls that we'd had, you know, just not that day or anything like that, just over the course of time. You start noticing this pattern with kids that are in their teens and their boyfriends. I've yet to hear a girlfriend spit on the boyfriend reported as abuse. I'm sure it does happen, but these girls are reporting that their boyfriends had spit on them, and the consistent follow-up to that was, well, he doesn't hit me. He's not ever abusive. He's not ever this or that, but he does spit on me. And, you know, and like Staci and I had explained, that is very much a form of abuse, and it is very much a form of assault. So.
Holy cow. See, I never would have thought in a million years to even think about spitting on my girlfriend.
Yeah, I don't know when that really kicked off and started. I know the first time it was ever disclosed to me was in a forensic interview back in 2014, and a 15-year-old girl disclosed it about her boyfriend at the time. I want to say her parents actually, or who had done the initial with her, because they noticed her boyfriend was becoming very abusive, and there are some other things going with that situation. But that was the first time that I had heard it, and then it just kept building over time with other situations.
That's crazy. That is
Mhm.
legitimately crazy because, I mean, I can't even begin because if, just me being me, if I saw something like that, especially in high school, I'm going to start whooping somebody's ass. I
Yeah.
mean,
But and that's not any different really than our adult abusers. I mean, when they're doing this, they're doing it, when the kids are out in their vehicle, or they're just hanging out at the house with just themselves, or they're, after practice and hanging out or whatever. And, it's really interesting how the abusive personalities are so much alike between teens and adults. I mean, it really it doesn't change. It builds. That's the thing.
so it does it. I mean, ultimately, it starts at the home front.
I mean, I think so. A lot of the kids that we see that they have these tendencies. That pattern has usually been picked up from somewhere.
Because they've seen it somewhere,
Yeah.
whether because
And
I go
Right.
ahead.
That goes back to that ACEs study that we talked about earlier. I mean, and you had mentioned it as well. You're at it's a higher percentage that you're going to end up either becoming an abuser or you're going to be in an
Yeah.
abusive relationship because that's what you know.
That's crazy because I remember when I was younger, I was probably, I couldn't tell you how old I was. I have no idea. I don't remember. I don't even remember really 100% of the story, but I do remember my side of the story.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a friend of mine, his parents, it was his stepdad and the mother. My friend, what was it? Something happened. Like, I don't know if he didn't drink all his little bit of milk or something.
Mm-hmm.
And his stepdad was like, you need to drink it. And he says, I can't finish it. So he picked him up from the dinner table and threw him into the door. Well, his back hit the spine, it hit the hinge, and he scratched it all the way down. And I remember the stepdad looking at me and he was like, you're next. And I went, nope. And I ran. And I went home and I told my mom, and my mom came out and she basically did what Mama Bear is going to do.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't get physical with him, but she definitely stood up for me because that was an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I know if he did it to him, as I'm looking back on it as an adult, he did it to him. I know damn well he was hitting on her too.
Yeah. And, I think that goes back also. And I know you and Staci have touched on different things as far as the behaviors and the signs of abuse and things like that. But, people outside of that abusive relationship, just from the witness standpoint, sometimes we can see some of these things that maybe they just don't seem right or they seem a little bit extreme. The way that certain, spouses treat their significant other in public, maybe if there's some harsh treatment or maybe they're being degrading or something like that. And, it really lends to the fact that if they're bold enough to do certain behaviors in public, imagine what's going on behind closed doors.
So now, would you both agree or disagree or one or the other? They say that if you want to know how a man treats his woman, look how he treats his mom.
I would agree.
You would agree to that?
I don't know. I think it varies with different relationships. Yeah, I mean, I think
it's got to be a case by case.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different dynamics in families, and I mean, I do think there could be some truth to that. In certain cases, that's probably the more common case than normal. But I don't know. I think every case is just situational and person by person.
Absolutely.
If they treat their mother horrible, then more than likely they would treat another woman
I will go
horrible.
with okay. I will go with that. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So that
Yeah.
changing it up a little bit, but
Yeah.
What was maybe, I don't know. I don't even want to really. Never mind. What was the best case? Like the best case that y'all have like worked together and kind of was like, you know what? That was badass. We kicked ass. That was it. We did it. They're good. Or are they all kind of like?
they're hit and miss, and there's good with them and there's bad with them.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, Staci. I mean, I feel like we've met a lot of people together, and I'm trying to think of one that I don't know.
A lot of them don't end up like they initially might want services and they don't end up following up. A lot of times we do run into that, but
that's what I figured. I figured nobody really followed up.
I think the day at the school, I would just say that I felt like that, overall was
the most
successful.
productive. Yeah, for sure.
And that was just recently, right?
That was 2
years?
Yeah, about 2 years ago. One thing that I liked about the school also, I think that besides the kids' relationships, I think there were a lot of kids that had domestic situations going on in the home. And I think maybe that gave them an outlet. I think on some of those cards, it seemed like we had about, it was about 50-50. I mean, they either disclosed it with their relationship or they disclosed it with their home life. So
when y'all,
or their face disclosed it.
Exactly.
Oh, I'm sure. The facial expressions are a dead giveaway on a lot of things. We were taught in Cleat the movement of the eyes. Remember, I don't know if you remember or not, Kristin. Do you remember the one scenario where the abuser was messing with it was a video, and the abuser was messing with his ring finger,
with his ring. Yeah.
And the wife smacked him with the ashtray. And then, of course, the police were called, whatnot. And then I remember being asked who was going to jail that night. And honestly, I forgot. And then it dawned on me, and I was like, unfortunately, it was her because of
the ashtray, I think.
Ashtray.
Yeah.
And so when she would come out of jail, because he's going to bail her out, she comes out of jail, now she's getting that, and then now we can have a whole nother issue, and that, of course, the cop would have to do his thing. But that's so crappy as far as anything else is concerned. It's just this domestic violence, again, it's just garbage. We just as humans just have to do better. And it still blows my mind about the school. Did any teenage girl reach out to you after the fact? Like, hey, I was legitimately spit on like Friday night, or this. Did somebody reach out and be like, this was jacked up?
There were a couple that walked up to myself or Lena at times that disclosed a little bit, like they didn't go into detail. None reached out to the agency that I'm aware of afterward, but I did give a card to every single one of them, and hopefully they didn't just throw it in the trash on their way out. And they got prizes for paying attention. So
I forgot about that.
That was kind of motivation right there. But I do know that one case that myself and Kristin both were aware, we did have a student abuser and a victim that we were known. They weren't in the same one, but it was really interesting to watch facial expressions on them. I will say that.
Very much so.
Oh yeah, the facial expressions are, like I said, when we were going through the practicals at the Cleat, those practicals, when we saw the shifting of the eyes or anything else, that's when we would key in on certain things. And it just is what it is. And again, being in law enforcement, we have to pay attention, because our life is ultimately in danger as well. When you're getting into a situation, a very emotional and physical situation, just being in law enforcement, or even as an advocate, what if she shows up or he shows up, and it can turn into a nasty thing.
And that's the thing too, when it comes to law enforcement response to domestics. And, going back to, you had talked about that video, he had the ring. And as I remember, he kept, it was kind of just a little trigger that, she knew that there was going to be a physical response to whatever she said, and I think with our jobs, it's easy to be exhausted. I know that I have worked 30 hours extra just this past week. And all of us. I mean, that's just the norm. And I know that's the norm for Staci too. We, as a profession, we are always on the go, and we're on edge a lot because we're exhausted and we have all these plates we're spinning. We're trying to get stuff to the DA's office. We're trying to keep our reports up, keep up with calls. And you had mentioned earlier about smaller police departments where you might be one officer responding to a call with 8 people. So I think it's really important for us as officers to maintain our situational awareness, our officer safety, but then also, don't let yourself get so, for lack of a better term, don't let yourself get numb to situations. You had talked about repeatedly going back to certain houses and things. We always need to be able to keep an open mind and listen and watch for those signs. The victim, she may not tell you anything that you can use for charges that first call or second call. Maybe if you've built up a rapport with that victim over the course of things, maybe there's going to be one day where she's finally going to get comfortable with you or he, and they're finally going to tell you what's going on. And then you can put a call into someone like Staci and get them that help and get a plan going. So we have to stay patient and be safe and all those things.
Absolutely. So it goes back with what Staci said about being, we have to put a safety protocol in effect. It has to be put into effect first.
Yeah, definitely.
Got to make sure that plan is out. Because I'll give somebody my last $50 if they just get the hell out of that relationship.
Well, and that's like, Staci, I don't know if you remember, we had I'm trying to think if it was a teenage victim. There was someone I had called you about because I just did not know any other resources with her. And I don't know, I think you were tied up on something, but you put us in touch with someone that could get her where she needed to go. And we got those resources. So, we just have to remember, we're all in this together, and we have to really rely on each other and what we all have to offer.
Right.
I want to say it was a teen victim, maybe pregnant even.
Yeah, wow. I think so. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So Carrie is asking a question. How do you trust someone that someone is not going to hurt you? That's a tough one.
Like, does she mean, do you mean just in relationship, like dating, or like meeting new people, or what do you mean exactly?
Probably a mixture of all of those is what
definitely I'm those red flags in that gut, like we talked about.
The red flags in the gut.
But abusers are good.
Oh, yeah.
On that aspect of it, abusers are good. If you're looking at it from that side of whether you can trust people or not going into a new relationship, things like that. Abusers, like I said, it's that grooming process. Now, as far as, I run into a lot of, I don't trust law enforcement, like from victims. Maybe they have a drug history or some other legal history. Those are pretty common. They'll say, I have a warrant right now. And that's where my relationship with law enforcement comes in handy. And if I'm bringing someone in for that reason, there are certain laws that protect that, if I'm bringing in for a domestic or a sexual assault, that they can't just arrest them. And as advocates, we also accompany victims to police interviews, to the hospital. So, as far as trusting new people, boundaries, red flags, there you go. Really important things. But as far as, if someone doesn't trust law enforcement, they don't trust the medical staff. So we go in for SANE exams. That's when you call your advocate, and your advocate can go with you. You might feel a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah,
that's good. Yeah, definitely the gut. I can't stress that enough. That gut instinct is a son of a bitch. And if somebody hasn't trusted their own gut, I suggest you start listening and paying attention to it.
And another thing too, the online dating scene is so huge, and then the apps and stuff like that.
Yeah. And
there's so many women and men. They're going and meeting people. They don't know this person at all, and they're going to go meet them, just just go meet them. They don't know anything about them or anything, So if people are going to be doing that, it needs to be a very public place. You need to let someone know where you're going to be at, share your location on your iPhone with close friends and, hey, I'm going to go meet this person. We're going to be at such and such restaurant or whatever. Share your location, and like they said, pay attention to the red flags, but definitely don't give someone any leeway to make you the perfect victim.
Absolutely. You know what I've done for friends of mine? Like if she was going out on a date, she would tell me that they're going to go meet at such and such restaurant. And I'd make sure that there was a bar over there, and I would go be there 15, 20 minutes earlier.
Yeah.
And I would sit there at the bar and watch and pay attention. And if anything happened and she sent me a text, I was already there. So I would just walk over and be like, "What are you doing here, girl?" And then I'd say, "Scoot over," and sit down right there and kind of look at the guy like, "What's up, buddy?"
Exactly. Yeah.
It's,
that's the thing. I mean, people, I have, I've got my two closest guy friends, and I've got, my girlfriends I'm really close to. And generally speaking, they all know, I mean, if I'm going to have a free night, if I'm going to go hang out with somebody, they know where I'm at. We're all adults on this mostly. But we need to make sure that people know where we're at. We need to make sure that we have that in place, that there's so many, it's just, there's so many situations now with the online stuff that can come up. It's not good at all to set yourself up for some things like that.
Absolutely. Well, you guys, I really appreciate it. I know everybody else appreciates it. Does anybody out there in the comment section, does anybody have any questions before we terminate this this awesome badass podcast? But anyway, I really do appreciate you guys taking the time and all the effort and everything.
Thanks for having us on.
Hey, no problem. I really do appreciate it. Getting the information out there is definitely a thing, like the hand gesture or the pizza thing. That was something that I've always wanted to talk about and be kind of like, is this a real deal? But the way it's perceived now, I can see why it would be such an effective. I can see why it's such an effective thing. I would definitely show up, period. But if anybody has any questions, especially out in the comment section, if anything's been triggered tonight, especially, they should just call the police department or try to get a hold of an advocate. Correct?
Yeah, for sure. And I didn't get to type in the comments for some reason. It didn't let me earlier, but I was just going to say thank you to Staci for all the very kind things that she said. And I really loved working with her, and I learned a lot from her. But, advocates, they're awesome. They're so helpful. So either if you're not a police officer, and like you have just told everybody, if you need to speak with somebody, I mean, advocates they're such a help, and they're such a great resource.
And so they would be able to reach out to, like, let's say the law enforcement side. Again, just to reiterate, the law enforcement, and then law enforcement can say, yeah, there's an advocate, and go that route. Correct? Yeah.
And you mean like if it's a person in crisis situation?
Let's say just after this show, if something happened, they just need to talk to somebody. I mean, other than me or somebody, they need to talk to somebody else. They
can call whoever their local law enforcement is, or whoever their jurisdiction is that they live in. You can call dispatch and say that you need to visit with an officer, and let them know it's what the kind of the specifics are, that hey, it's not an immediate incident or something like that, but you just need to speak with someone, and they can come over there. And like we talked about in Oklahoma, we have the Safe Line packet, so and we've got the availability of advocates in most places, so they can
absolutely
put you in touch with that.
Perfect. Yeah. Everybody's saying thank you so much. You guys, I really appreciate it. Thank you again. We'll probably do another show. Definitely. I'll keep in touch with you guys, and we'll have a little bit more of a notice.
Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, you guys. So we are going to end it. You guys have a good night. Be safe.
You
And
guys too. Thank you.
do a 2021 and kick ass. So, all right, you guys.
All right.
Have a safe night.
All right. You too. Bye.
Bye.